Hello, and welcome to the Geopolitics Explained podcast. Last episode, I discussed scenarios of conflict that could unfold between the United States and China in the future. These scenario analysis episodes don't seek to predict the future, but they can help us identify the drivers today that could help shape it. Today, we're going to pivot from scenarios of conflict to scenarios of cooperation between the United States and China, and I hope that this will highlight some more of the potential forces that could help determine the future direction of our geopolitical world. A current geopolitical narrative that is heard quite often is the one that pits the Chinese and the Americans against each other, with China being seen as the rising power and the United States being seen as the ruling power. Is there any likelihood that we don't see this clash occur at all, and we actually see cooperation? If so, what could this cooperation potentially look like, and what forces could lead to it occurring? Now, there are three scenarios that we're going to explore in this episode. The first of which refers to dual spheres of influence. Could both the United States and China recognize the limits of the pursuit of dominance? Could we see both happily fall into a world of regionalization, with each possessing its own sphere of influence? Or would power corrupt, and would each seek to undermine the other's influence? Now, as I said in the intro, I think it's worthwhile to explore these scenarios, again, to determine potential forces that could determine the direction that the future world heads in. But I believe this scenario is unlikely, largely because the US possesses footholds in the Indo-Pacific that it wouldn't give up. And because China has such a commanding role in trade and global supply chains, this would want to see them remain integrated into the United States' sphere of influence, which would be North America and South America. As a result of this, both sides would naturally step on the other's toes, and that would risk escalation between the two. A second potential scenario is the mutual dependency trap. I've discussed this before, and the general premise is, would such a decoupling between the United States and China have limits that neither could endure? Could hybrid conflict be too costly to sustain? For example, we could see such moves cause a global recession or a resource shock that would have dramatic negative impacts on both individually. In such an environment, conflict and competition could shift to cooperation, as both realise that a new world is emerging and that determining the direction of this world together is of greater incentive than fighting for complete control of it. This scenario would ultimately depend on the limits that each side could endure. But as both pursue resilience against the other in the geopolitical world today, as time advances, this scenario becomes less likely. The final scenario that I want to discuss is a dual crisis. A massive crisis, such as one of an artificial intelligence nature, or in the energy sector, or a resource scarcity crisis, could force cooperation between the two sides. This reminded me of the AI 2027 paper and the optimistic scenario where all parties seek to de-escalate. The alternative here would be an unmanageable crisis that hurts all and that continues to escalate. For those who didn't read the paper, there is a YouTube video that I've included in the Substack post that sums it up very well. The link for my Substack blog will be in the description. So, that's the three scenarios of potential cooperation that I want to discuss. For now, in the military realm, we're far away from a hot war between the United States and China. But as we've been discussing for the last few weeks, war is fought differently today. The United States and China continue to fluctuate between competition and conflict across a range of these hybrid realms. The most important aspect is that relations between the two aren't trending in a positive direction, and this competition and conflict between the two will continue to deteriorate due to these hybrid strategies. This leads me to wonder, are scenarios of cooperation, such as the ones that we've discussed, possible at all? Now, I'll start by discussing this question from China's point of view. For China, they wouldn't challenge the United States today in an arena where they are clearly less powerful. China's incentives lie with continuing a strategy of patience. If cooperation enables them to maintain this strategy of patience with less pain being caused by the United States, then the Chinese will agree to this. This is ultimately what we saw in the meeting between Trump and President Xi last week. Eventually, as China's structural advantages accrue, a strategy of breakout could begin to occur. It's worth noting here that this is an individual Chinese strategy and that it occurs without US involvement. Now, moving on to the United States, and as we've discussed in recent weeks, the main US strategy against China is one of containment. As China's advantages accrue, this will become more difficult. The United States will then have to pursue slightly more aggressive strategies to defend its position. Remembering what I just said a few short seconds ago, China's advantages are an individual strategy. The United States seeking to contain China, that is a bilateral strategy. It would be instigated by the United States against China. Alternatively, as we've also discussed recently, the United States could pivot to a strategy of regionalization. This could be in cooperation with China or not. The Trump administration has shown some interest in disconnecting from the Indo-Pacific and focusing on a more Monroe Doctrine strategy in the Americas. In the short term, I can see this happening. It would explain why Trump is so set on ending conflicts around the world, so US attention can pivot towards South America, especially Venezuela. Through a strategy of regionalization, this would also allow Trump to continue seeking fixes domestically in the United States. But if the United States leaves China alone, we will see China's individual built-in advantages continue to develop unhindered. China will then gain influence on a global scale as the United States is seeking fixes in its declining system. To sum this up in a sentence, the United States is at a disadvantage here because it has to take action to limit China's rise. This is China's advantage. China is playing the long game, and in doing so, it can pick hybrid battles that are shrouded in mystery. The United States is defending its position and is seeking to bring power, influence, and leverage back home. Some of these pursuits by the United States involve the more visible realms of hybrid conflict, such as trade and finance. As a result of this, the narrative is that the United States is painted as the more aggressive of the two superpowers. Today, there are multiple realms where the United States possesses a clear advantage, such as in military strength and in global naval reach. But the relationship between China's advantages and the United States' decline is the key metric to monitor here, because the United States could one day lose this advantage. As relations between the two continue to worsen, the potential scenarios that one side could be willing to pursue to hurt the other will deepen and become more unpredictable, especially as both sides seek to grow more resilient to the other. Today, we're living through a period where both the United States and China can hurt each other, and so a dramatic escalation is less likely. This naturally will see us continue to cycle through the escalation-de-escalation cycle, which often ends in periods of cooperation between the two, just as we're seeing today. In the future, this becomes a different story. The United States today is seeking to take action in an attempt to change the characteristics of this US-China relationship and to address its own decline. Trump is seeking to use the leverage of the dollar, the energy security of the United States, and many nations' dependence on the United States for security in order to get what he wants. This could strengthen the United States, and it could work to reverse some of the declining indicators that they possess. But some indicators, such as falling trust in the US dollar, rising US debt, and internal political polarization, and issues that will be easily solved. They are ingrained, and solving them won't come without pain. Now, that isn't to say that it's plain sailing for China. I've discussed their geographic issues, with them surrounded by multiple maritime choke points, and I've also released episodes on China's demographics and on their high local government debt. But the difference is that China is proactive, and this gives them room to adapt. The United States is pursuing fixes today because they have cruised in the system for decades, and this has seen issues emerge that have been left unresolved. To reiterate one of the points I made earlier, the most important characteristic of this relationship between China's rise and the potential US decline is leverage. Hybrid conflict will continue to unfold for now, because both nations can hurt the other, and then they will seek to step down from this escalatory spiral and to pursue some form of cooperation. But as they continue to pursue resiliency, it's worth considering these scenarios that could occur if we continue on today's negative path. In geopolitics, we can discuss scenarios to explore the forces that could be important, but the future unfolding exactly through the potential scenarios that we've discussed today is very unlikely. Swan events can lead to unpredictable shocks, and superpower geopolitics is no exception to this. With this in mind, the question of who can hurt the other in the future remains difficult to gauge. But I still believe it's vital to explore the details of today and which forces could determine the direction that we head in the future. In the coming weeks, I'll be diving into some issues that could spiral into deeper crises for both China and the United States. These include fiscal dominance, energy security, rare earths, the future of space as a new geopolitical realm, and global trade. Look out for these episodes in the coming weeks if they sound of interest to you. On Thursday, I'll cover Trump's recent Asia tour, including his meeting with Xi, and how some of these potential future scenarios are connected to what occurred during that meeting. That's all for today. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on the podcast platform of your choice. It's greatly appreciated and it helps out the podcast. I also, currently on Substack, have a 20% off for my premium readership. If that's an offer that sounds of interest to you, then once again, the link to Substack is in the description. Premium readership includes access to the website that I'm building over on Substack, which is called the Geopolitics Database. And it also includes access to posts that are blocked by the paywall. Again, the link for all of that will be in the description of this episode. I've been Dylan, and I'll talk to you next time.